And good day, everybody. Hi, I'm Walter, and I'm the Dutch mentor, and welcome back to the SMART podcast. SMART is for self care, for mindful growth, for adaptive learning, for rhythmic operations, and a thriving community. I'm excited to have Kevin with me today, as he will introduce himself in a minute. We've set this up to have two great questions answered, one around mindful growth and the other one around thriving community. So stick with us. I promise will be exciting. Energy will flow clearly, and there will be some actionable takeaways coming out of this as well. Kevin, thank you for coming on to the podcast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll pose my first question to you.
Yeah, so first of all, Walter, thank you so much for having me. I love the energy. You and I connected behind the scenes. So I am Kevin Palmieri. I am the founder and the host of Next Level University, a global top 100 podcast with 2,200 episodes, a million something listens and listeners in 180 plus countries. And every day we podcast to help people get a little bit better.
That is absolutely phenomenal. Love the energy, and that
Thank you.
is really infectious, right? As we say. So, with that said, I love the fact that the topic of mindful growth and growth mindset, and people struggle with this, as we discussed, prior to the show itself. I do an exercise with my mentees, and when I speak in larger groups, about the difficulty for us to thinking outside of the box.
Mm.
And I think that you alluded to that as well. So why don't you dive into the question of what do you interpret as mindful growth, and what can people do different in order to advance themselves?
Yeah, so mindful growth to me means learning beyond what is obvious. So, yes, if you want to swim, you have to learn how to swim. If you want to snowboard, you have to learn how to snowboard. Yes. But as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as somebody doing great things in the world, I think a lot of us, we want to learn what's easy for us. Mindful growth to me means knowing what our weaknesses are, knowing where the resistance is, and then dedicating our time to learning that. When I was the brokest I've ever been, that's when I learned the most about money, unfortunately. When I was really single and heartbroken, that's when I learned the most about relationships. I didn't want to learn about them, but I think as a byproduct of the pain that I was in, I did. So, yeah, mindful growth to me is learning about the stuff that you don't necessarily want to because it doesn't come naturally to you. I think that's how you become well rounded.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I met with an engineer a long time ago, and he actually put it in a way is that, when we see a problem, it's like a lock set. We immediately grab the key that we think that unlocks that lock set. And all we're doing is and we do this over and over and over, we get the same exact results. Scratch our head and say, well, I'm not happy with the result.
Mm.
What do I need to do different? Well, what we need to do different is really kind of looking at it from a different point of view, and by forcing ourselves. So another great example, and that a teacher at one of the corporations I worked at, he was actually flown in as a sensei for a 3P event, a Lean Six Sigma event, where we were creating a laboratory, and we would have painstaking exercise of building the new laboratory out of cardboard or miniature setups. And he would literally come around and look at it and inspect and say, yeah, 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 to an interpreter, and then take whatever we came up with and smashed it onto the ground. And we were shocked. And he says, well, this is 10 hours worth of work. And he says, I know you can do better.
Mm.
And that is really about forcing yourself outside of that. So give me an example of something that people can do on a day-to-day basis. What action can they take on their own to force themselves to think outside of the norms?
Yeah. So what I always try to do is I try to sell myself on the opposite perspective. So if I say, we have a problem with a client and here's how I normally would solve it, give me the opposite of that and try to sell yourself on the benefits of that. You don't have to do it. I'm not saying you have to do it, but you'd be surprised at how many things might come from that. That's part one. And then part two, I would probably try to create some sort of metric where it's number of minutes learned, number of minutes focused, number of pages read on something that is a weakness of yours. When you do that long enough, you get really good at things and you become more well-rounded. So yeah, shift the perspective, sell yourself on the opposite, and then create some sort of measurable metric of amount of time invested in this weakness.
Yeah, I love that. And again, we have proven over time that those who measure performance accelerate, right? And so why is it so difficult for people to measure themselves? Why is it so difficult to keep ourselves accountable?
because it hits you at the ego level when you realize, oh my goodness, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. And it makes you question everything about yourself. That's one. And the things that are hard to measure are usually the things that we're not doing well. If you have $5 million in the bank, it's probably not that hard to measure that every single day. But I think it goes against our ego to look at what our weaknesses are. I think that's part one. And then part two, it's really hard to be patient with the progress when you see the number go from 1 to 2 to 3. There's not a lot happening, but incremental growth, as we all know, is the way to success anyway.
Yeah, it is the interesting enough, it's the human behavior that we give up when we don't have instant gratification. That's the sad thing about today's world, right? Is that the 24-hour news cycle, everything you want is today. So habit forming becomes a very, very, very difficult thing. I say too, look what happens on December 31st, right? Everybody goes into the new year. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to work out. I'm going to have the best year of my life. They pay the membership fee, and then they go 3 times the first week, 2 times the second week, and once the week after. Then the guy who owns the gym loves you because he has all the room in the world for the dedicated bodybuilders. Well, you pay their fees, right? It is sustainability comes exactly what you say, is measuring every day. Now, from a consequence perspective, so when you have done this for you, for yourself, and you fell short, what kind of consequences do you set into play for yourself in order to be able to make it meaningful enough to help you drive success and sustainment over time?
Yeah, we have something called the $100 habit. So I was struggling with fitness. I went to my wife. I said, hey, I'm going to go to the gym 7 times this week. Or I gave her a $100 bill. I said, I need you to rip this up in front of me. You better believe I went to the gym 7 times that week. So it's something called a commitment device. Okay, I will either accomplish X by Y date, or I will donate X amount of dollars to a foundation I do not believe in, or I will invest in a stock in a company that I absolutely hate. Fortunately, it creates pain in advance, which is what we want, because that helps us get the pleasure that we're actually after. So yeah, any commitment device, $100 habit, something where you're actually putting skin on the line, that helps me a ton.
So I love that actionable takeaway for people, right? Is if you want to make gains, you need to have consequences of meaning. I convince my clients to send me a Venmo for $100, but nobody has taken me up on it. All kidding aside, I do tell people to put $100 in their 529 accounts, which is for their kids, so to speak, in order to save for the future. And it needs to be a significant enough amount of money in order to have meaning. Hey, Chris, so it's a great actionable takeaway. And I love the fact that people can buy into this literally and really make this part of their daily and weekly measurements for success. So let's go into the next topic. We talked about the thriving community. Why is a community so important to us, and how can we best establish that?
The community you put yourself in literally dictates what behavior is normal, what actions are normal, what conversation is normal, and it allows you to be the most authentic version of yourself. And I think there's a lot of us out there that don't feel like we fit in. And I wonder if that's just because we haven't gotten into the community that allows us to be fully ourselves, right? A lot of us play small. I think one of the reasons we play small is because the communities around us force us to play small. So if you want to be the most authentic version of yourself, one, that starts with you understanding what that is. And then 2, that's getting around people who are subconsciously and unconsciously allowing you to feel like you can be. And that is such an unlock for all of us, for sure.
Yeah. So a very interesting concept, because I think, again, partly the behavioral of laziness, or is that we join a group and we don't feel that we fit, we stick with it because we're in the group.
Yeah.
Well, if you put some extra time and effort into it, you could have an outcome that really helps you thrive, right? So I think that I work with larger healthcare organizations and in a professional group called the American Council of Healthcare Executives, and we put on events. And these are networking events. And these are really meant to have like-minded people come into a room, share a drink and conversation, share experience, and hopefully it opens up doors or at least build a network. But if you go into this room, what do I see? I see people standing in circles. And how difficult is it for me to penetrate a circle? Very difficult, right? So I tell them the mindset shift should take place on the leaders by opening up that circle into a horseshoe. So you're inviting people to come in. Now, you as an individual go into that group and you listen. And if you don't feel the energy, and go to the next group and to the next group until you find the right community, right? The right group of folks. Now, of course, over time, you want to challenge that too, because you don't want to be lazy and be in the group that it makes it too easy, because you still want to stretch yourself and grow. So what is an action that you feel people can take in order to be able to find that right group for them that allows them to both be authentic, but also to grow?
Two things. One, sit down and write out what your core values are, what your core beliefs are, and what your core aspirations are. And then from there, we can kind of establish, where do these people hang out? It's very easy when we think about sports. I like football. I like this team. Okay, we know where to find those people. When it comes to other stuff, it can be a little bit harder. So core values, core beliefs, core aspirations, that's one. And then I got to break it down to the micro day to day, because that's what I do every day. And again, another metric, every day send X amount of messages to people who are like-minded and try to add value to their lives. Really go above and beyond. We all get messages on LinkedIn from people who say, hey, I'd love to connect. What does that even mean? Add value first, and then people will want to be around you. So yeah, core values, core beliefs, core aspirations, make a list. And then from there, we can figure out where those people actually are. And then number two, every day, if you message 5 people who share those things, you're going to have a pretty cool community probably pretty quickly.
Yeah, I love it. It is about building meaningful relationships, right? And if those relationships are meaningful and value added and bi-directional, they can become partnerships. And of course, partnerships can lead to financial gains if that's what you're looking for. But don't lead with that, right?
Yes. Yeah,
hey, listen, I love the conversation. I'm sure that you and I could talk for another 2 hours about a variety of topics. But I know that you need to go outside and enjoy the beautiful foliage in New Hampshire. Thank you for coming and joining me in this conversation. The 2 key takeaways that I know are actionable, and whoever listens to this, if they follow this, and that's the key, habit building, doing these things on the day-to-day, hold yourself accountable, measure your success, use an accountability partner in the process. That could be a spouse, could be a significant other, or could be a coach or a mentor, but do it. Listening and not doing it doesn't add value, right? So do things. So give me some parting words of wisdom and tell us where we can find you.
Oh man, the parting words of wisdom: from day to day, progress is invisible. From year to year, progress is impossible to miss. That's why these habits are so valuable. They don't seem like they're paying off, but eventually you'll get to a place, look back and say, holy crap, I can't believe how much it has. Those are the parting words of wisdom. And then the podcast is called Next Level University. We do an episode every day. It's on all the platforms. So if you want to get a little bit better every single day, we would love to add value after you listen to Walter's latest episode, of course.
Okay. Kevin, thank you very much for your words of wisdom. And my parting words is very simple. In just 15 minutes a day, you too can be the leader you always wanted to be, and is certainly the leader that your team needs to thrive under. Kevin, thank you very much for joining me today. Great conversation. Look forward again. And check out other podcast episodes on any of the platforms out there. Have a great day, everybody.